Good afternoon, folks. This is John Rust, your host on Rust on the Radio, broadcasting all across central Indiana on Freedom 95, 950 AM and 95.9 FM, and on podcast all across the world. Here in the studio today, I am with Justin George. Welcome, Justin.
Great to be here.
How was your week?
Been great, and just enjoying the great week and the nice weather, and especially just...
Well, it's not raining today, at least. Unfortunately, it looks like it's going to rain. As a farmer, we are behind the eight ball, folks, on farming in Indiana right now because we've had so much rain. We're just getting the crops in just barely, you know. The saying, I'm sorry, Aiden Marietta joins us as well.
That's all good. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Great. That's all right.
So back on farming, there is a lot of rain, and it's really hard to get the crops in. Some stuff is up. You know, there's this expression, knee-high by the 4th of July for corn. Unfortunately, this year, that may still be the case for some corn, but actually, as the technology in farming improved, the saying really was knee-high by the 4th of June, because so much has improved with plant genetics especially, and modern farming techniques. That's why we need fewer acres today to farm more corn and soybeans that have ever been produced in history. Farmers are doing a fantastic job at producing an abundant crop that keeps us all fed. So once again, no farmers, no food. Thank you to all the corn farmers, to all the soybean farmers, to the egg farmers. I'll raise my hand. Pork farmers, we all love bacon. Oh my gosh, bacon's wonderful.
It's one of my favorites.
But the weather is not been great for planting this year. It's been really wet, especially in southern Indiana. But so on point, there's been some just horrible news this week with what's going on out in Los Angeles, and it's spreading across the country. I want to talk about the violent riots going on, and in particular, the Mexican flag. The Mexican flag being flown as a flag of a conquering nation over the streets of Los Angeles is absolutely wrong. No, that is not a protest. That is a flag of a conquering nation. That's what the Democratic Party stands for today, folks. They have lost their minds. They want the American flag replaced with the Mexican flag. Pure and simple. They are doing it today in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Look at the pictures. Go on Twitter. Just Google it. You will see Mexican flag after Mexican flag. And that's a conquering nation flag. You know, that is United States territory. That is not Mexico. If you want to fly the Mexican flag, fly it in Mexico. This is America. Stars and stripes. You know, so many soldiers have died for the rights of all, not just Hoosiers, but every American for the American flag. So that just really gets under my skin that, and number one, the Politico magazine is calling this just quote-unquote unrest.
That is not unrest. That is a riot.
No, they are taking bricks and concrete blocks, throwing them at police officers, and some of these cars have exploded, and they're still stoning the police officers.
Yeah.
That is
awful.
Violent.
And may I also point out, in one video, they were trapped in a corner, the police officers in a little tunnel corner, and someone threw, whether it was a Molotov cocktail or a firebomb or some firework. How many cops were hurt in that? How many were killed?
Well,
we don't know.
How many millions of illegal immigrants have came into this country since 2017?
Far too many.
It's over 6 million. That's a conquering nation, folks. That's an army. 6 million people is an army.
An invading army.
And you know who invited them in? Jim Banks, and calling for an influx of immigrants. He got his wish. That's
Per the Atlantic magazine.
Per the Atlantic magazine. Look it up, folks. He was quoted as saying, "We need an influx of immigrants." No, we don't. We need borders that are respected. We need a full and complete border wall from the Gulf of America to the Pacific Ocean.
Yes.
An impermeable border wall, not just a stick fence with some barbed wire on it. I've been down to the border myself, folks. And in some places, in a lot of places, it is just a few strands of barbed wire only 2 feet off the ground. You know, a cow can literally walk right across that barbed wire.
Yeah.
There is no wall. And remember, President Trump asked for a border wall in 2017 and 18. And you know who blocked it? The Republican Congress. Back then, USA Today did a poll that only 26% of House Republicans supported a border wall between the Gulf of America and the Pacific Ocean. Only 26%. Jim Banks was part of that class.
He was. He was there with Paul Ryan.
Yeah.
And
Well, he was voting 15 times for Kevin McCarthy, who just stabbed Trump repeatedly in the back.
yeah,
Repeatedly. And look at what happened. We have no border wall because of the Republican Congress in 2017 and 18 saying, oh, no, we don't want the border wall. Let's give Trump some funds for border security. And what are they doing? They're hitting the rewind button, and they're playing it again. They all pretend and thump their chest. Oh, we're going to build a full and complete border wall now. Let's wait and see if it really happens, folks. I wouldn't hold your breath. Jim Banks is out thumping his chest that we're going to be spending $250 billion, with a B, billion dollars on border security. And I'm all for that. But let's actually build the border wall. Let's not just hire more what I call concierge officers at the border that a next Democratic president could just say, hey, let them all in because there's no wall, help them across the border with their luggage. Because that's what happened under Biden.
yeah.
And, who was funding that? The Republican Congress. Jim Banks. He was in the U.S. House of Representatives during that time, and he did nothing to stop it. The Republican Congress, Aaron Hounchin, the entire Indiana delegation, they voted for leadership that worked hand in glove with Joseph Biden to have no effective border. They would do some votes that were meaningless, but when the only vote that really counts in Congress is the funding bills, because those have to pass. And the Republicans very quickly stepped in line with the Democrats to actually fund stuff like U.S. aid, where $50 million was going for condoms in Gaza. What on earth are we doing paying $50 million for condoms in Gaza? The average Hoosier in their lifetime pays in $500,000 in federal taxes. So that means 100 Hoosiers have to work their entire lives to pay for the condoms that the Republican Congress funded for Gaza, amongst other stuff, these transgender comic books and transgender operas and all this baloney. And it is...
It's astounding.
The Republican Party, in both in Indiana and in Congress, is now the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is the lunatic, Marxist, bike lane, crazy transgender Indigo Party, where they want to take lanes from Hoosiers that paid for the roads and give them to bicyclists who don't even use them.
Nobody in downtown Indianapolis uses one bike lane. I would know. I've seen it myself.
Exactly. I've never seen it either. They're empty.
We have the fourth highest gasoline tax in the country. We paid for these roads, folks. Gasoline tax revenue is pouring in literally. And you know what the state GOP is doing now? Part of SB 1 is authorizing Governor Braun to toll every single interstate, including 465, in the state of Indiana, to make them toll roads. So when you're going to work or visiting grandma on the weekend with your kids, you're going to have to pay a toll. That is absolutely wrong. I am fighting that. That's why I'm doing this show. That's why I'm not going to keep quiet on this. We cannot allow that to happen. I'm hoping to shame the state GOP into not actually implementing the toll roads. Unfortunately, I think they will, but hopefully, if we get some groundswell of people saying, hey, enough is enough, let's stop it. Let's have some common sense in Indiana again. Let's have some fiscal conservatism again in the state of Indiana. Why has the GOP in Indiana folded and became the Democratic Party? Well, it starts back to about 20 years ago when the Democratic Party used to control the state, and then it switched to Republicans. And what happened is all these Democrats went into the Republican Party to keep their office. And now they have all these laws in place to keep people like me from even running in the Republican primary. You know, they threw me off the ballot. I had more ballot petition signatures from regular Hoosiers than any other candidate, thousands more than anyone else running for the Senate. And they threw me off the ballot because they don't want true conservatives to be able to run. They only want people that are under state party control. Jamie Rittenauer, she had a tweet out. She's trying to run for Secretary of State, I believe. I think she announced a exploratory committee.
She did, something like to that effect. She ran for governor back in 24.
And this is eye-opening, folks. Listen to this. For her to run for Secretary of State, she has to pay, and it's unclear whether it's to the state or to the state GOP, 10% of the salary she would be earning as Secretary of State as a entrance fee to even be able to run. You know, it's pay to play. That's a poll tax, pure and simple.
And I would just point out, I don't know how accurate this comparison would be, but poll taxes were used in the South back during the Jim Crow era to keep African Americans from voting and to keep certain people from running for office.
They were used to keep African Americans from voting back then, and today they are used to keep people like me from even running for political office.
And it is wrong, and I will say as a young conservative, it is wrong what they did to you. And shame on, I will say this unapologetically, shame on the state GOP for doing that. They're wrong.
Well, we say the word state GOP, but it's really the state government party. They are not conservatives. We have to make the Republican Party conservative again. Indiana's a red state. Folks, we're out of time. John Rust on the Radio. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on the John Rust Show. In Indiana political news, number one, Rob Kendall tweeted this out. He says, and I'll say, WTF does the Indiana Secretary of State have to do with agriculture that's still overseen by the Lieutenant Governor in Hungary? Diego Morales, our Secretary of State, is out running around Hungary. What on earth is going on? Why isn't he here trying to enforce fair elections here? Of course, he's not. He's part of the, cabal that just is against regular Hoosiers from running. He's the one that said, no, John Rust, you cannot run for U.S. Senate because only the political insiders get to choose who the Indiana U.S. Senator is, not regular Hoosiers. And then there's this India trip where Diego went to India, and there's all these questions about who funded this trip. Diego has never came forward and said who paid for this trip, but he did say, well, and to make amends, I am reimbursing whoever paid for the trip with his own personal funds. But he won't show us the check, the canceled check. He won't say who actually paid for this trip. But something is coming to light on this, and I want to get into this a little bit. This is from the Indy Reporter on X, on Twitter. The Diego India connection makes sense now. They are bringing in cheap foreign labor for data centers. Whenever they say this will create X number of jobs, they don't mean for Americans. It's for other people coming in on these special visas. And Diego was running around India with this person who is selling visas. You know, and guess who is in on this? It looks like Indiana Representative Jefferson Shreve to explore U.S.-India economic cooperation and U.S. impact on India's tech, infrastructure, and agriculture sectors. His vision, this is Jefferson's, for sustainable data centers and AI-powered solutions inspires us. Number one, when a politician says sustainable, that means grift. That means someone's getting money under the table because sustainable means more expensive, pure and simple. I've went over this repeatedly. The cheapest electrical power in the state of Indiana is and always will be coal. Always. There's just no bucking that at all whatsoever. Why on earth are Republicans? This is why I say we don't have a Republican Party that's conservative. It's just Democrats pretending to be Republicans. Fortunately, Diego has lots of challengers, hopefully. It looks like Knox County Clerk Dave Shelton has indicated he's going to run for Secretary of State, so I applaud that. Jamie Rittenauer is going to run. So there will be, hopefully, some change coming in that direction. So also, folks, there have been some very troubling allegations over child pornography against David Finkel, who at one time over a year ago worked for my campaign. I call balls and strikes fairly for everyone, including those I have worked with in the past. According to Fox 59 News, FBI agents served a warrant at the home of David Finkel stemming from a child pornography investigation. I just want to say, David has not worked for me for over a year now. I ended my campaign for the U.S. Senate after the Indiana Supreme Court ruled that 81% of Hoosiers do not have the right to run for political office. So my campaign ended over 1 year ago. But I want to say, my heart goes out to his family and to all those directly affected and indirectly affected. But I want to note that according to the Indianapolis Star, no official charges have been filed. Let's see what the investigation brings about. In other troubling news, I just heard on WIBC this week that there are 4 to 5 fentanyl drug-related deaths right here in Indianapolis every single day.
Tragic. It's shameful.
Well, this fentanyl poisoning thing is growing, and it is terrible. And this is where I like to talk about these career politicians like Jim Banks, who come to Indiana at Lincoln Day dinners on occasion and thump their chest how evil fentanyl is. And then they go back to D.C. and they vote exactly the opposite. Both Jim Banks and Todd Young voted for the First Step Act, which today is releasing fentanyl dealers from prison early.
It's insanity, and that's what happens when you're soft on crime. People like that get out of jail free.
Well, to lose a child, to a fentanyl overdose is something so horrific. I can't even describe it. It's beyond horrible. It's a tragedy. It's a human tragedy. This issue keeps coming up because fentanyl dealers are being released from prison early. And pure and simple, it's the First Step Act. Jim Banks and Todd Young voted for that act.
Yes.
Jim Banks refuses to live in the state of Indiana. He moved to Virginia as soon as he could when he was elected to Congress. He now lives in a $1 million home in Virginia.
Right, in the Commonwealth.
He's not a Hoosier. What is a Virginian? What do you call it?
They're called Virginians.
Virginians,
Yeah.
Okay. So Virginia Jim voted for the First Step Act. I will say one thing for Todd Young. He voted for that bill, absolutely, but he also lives in the state of Indiana.
I've seen him before. Never had an issue with him personally, and I will say he does live in this state. I can confirm that.
So you
good on him.
And so you can run into him at the grocery store, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And say, hey, why on earth is the First Step Act still in law? Why aren't we changing that?
Yes.
Admit that it was wrong. Admit that it needs change so that fentanyl dealers don't get out of prison early. But you can't say that to Jim Banks because he's not here.
No.
The only time you will ever see Jim Banks in the state of Indiana is when he is collecting a check.
Yeah.
From
That's all he
either
cares about.
from a donor or from a party bigwig at a Lincoln Day dinner, and he rarely goes to those even.
Usually, his staff usually does the dirty work for him. I would know.
Well, he's too busy collecting checks from various lobbyists in D.C. Guess who one of his donors are? It's BlackRock.
Of course. That
course.
doesn't surprise me.
And look at what the BlackRock agenda is. The BlackRock agenda, folks, is part of that agenda that wanted the First Step Act.
ESG and DEI, they're the originators of it.
It's all this liberal stuff. Indiana is a red state. We are a ruby red state. Why do we have all these liberal Democrats pretending to be conservatives when they're here in Indiana thumping their chest at Lincoln Day dinners or when they do show up, but they always vote exactly the opposite in D.C.? And you don't hear about that, folks. Other than Rob Kendall, bless his heart, he always is pushing this hard. Kendall and Casey show is excellent for this.
They're great.
They're
awesome.
fantastic. Just some statistics about fentanyl in Indiana that Jim Banks obviously doesn't give two hoots about.
No.
In 2021, over 70% of drug overdose deaths in the state of Indiana were caused by fentanyl. In one reporting period, 74% of suspected overdose deaths in Marion County here in Indianapolis had fentanyl detected in their toxicology report. That says it all. We are facing a wave of fentanyl deaths after Jim Banks and Todd Young voted for this awful law that allows criminals to escape their punishment. Ronald Reagan very clearly said, if you do the crime, you have to do the time.
Yeah, he was right.
It's unfortunately, Jim Banks wants fentanyl dealers to be eligible to be released from prison early. Why would you want to do that? To curry favor with the liberal Atlantic magazine?
Probably.
Either that or for votes. Who knows?
Or both.
It's, how many Hoosiers have died because of that awful law? How many will die in the future? This law needs to be changed now. Jim Banks, Todd Young, tie this up now. Stop it. You voted for it. We have the Republican majority, allegedly.
It can be. We should repeal it. I don't think we should fix it.
In
We
the
should
House,
repeal it.
Senate, and we have the presidency. Let's absolutely repeal the First Step Act, and let's make crime
Let's protect
not pay
lives.
again. Right now, crime pays because people like Jim Banks are letting people off the hook early.
It should not pay. We need to make it very clear that crime doesn't pay, and we need to throw these people behind bars.
Yeah.
Where they are supposed to be.
And protect innocent lives.
Well, guess what, folks? Over 250,000 Americans have died from fentanyl poisoning since that law that both Jim Banks and Todd Young voted for passed. Folks, it is a sad day in Indiana when we have to have these people serving as our senators. No, absolutely not. Folks, when we come back, we'll get right back into this. This is John Rust on The John Rust Show. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on The John Rust Show. Rust on the radio, broadcasting on Freedom 95 all across central Indiana on 950 AM and 95.9 FM and on podcast. So over the last few weeks, there's been this blow up between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And in all marriages, there's fights. But there's some good that's coming out of this, and that's we have to get back to true conservative principles. And I think that's where Elon Musk wants to lead President Trump to, and that is in Trump's own words. And this is a direct quote, folks. This is from Elon Musk tweeted this out. Wise words from Donald J. Trump. This is Donald J. Trump says, "I cannot believe Republicans are extending the debt ceiling. I am a Republican and I am embarrassed." What do we have today? That tweet was in 2013. In 2025, today, Republicans, they're not just extending it. They are massively increasing it. The spending is not just ballooning, it is exponentially increasing to the rate that we're not going to be able to pay it back someday. It is so high that just the cost to pay for the debt that Jim Banks and Todd Young are going to vote for, apparently, and have voted for, will be over $1 trillion, with a T, trillion dollars a year just in interest payments. That's why we have inflation, because there's no such thing as a free lunch. And again, this is from Elon Musk. I couldn't agree more, and I couldn't agree more as well. This is from Donald J. Trump. No member of Congress should be eligible for re-election if our country's budget is not balanced. Deficits not allowed. Once again, this is from Donald J. Trump, who's president today. No member of Congress should be eligible for re-election if our country's budget is not balanced. Deficits not allowed. You know, when Jim Banks and Todd Young were both elected to Congress in 2016, your share as a taxpayer of our nation's debt was $170,000. It was a lot back then. And we talked about how terrible it was back then. But it has done nothing but balloon since then because we have no fiscal conservatives in Washington. We only have two, I believe, and that's Rand Paul and Thomas Massie. Others talk about it a lot, but in the end, they vote for it.
Although Warren David said, I'll give him credit.
And Warren
Ohio,
Davidson voted against it.
Ohio,
So
he
we have
voted against it. He's one of Massey's closest allies.
So of the Republicans in Congress, folks, we have 3. There are only 3 conservatives. Everyone else is a Democrat or a rhino or a Democrat pretending to be a Republican, like Todd Young and Jim Banks. And ugh. And like I said, the Democratic Party, they went off the deep end. There's no hope for them. Sorry. But we have to have conservatism. And what does the Senate Republicans tweet out about this past week? They have this stupid, I can't say what I want to say, stupid tweet about with Senate Majority Leader John Thune on it. It says, almost Friday. Like he worked at a job for 5 days and he wanted to go get a 6-pack and relax for the weekend. John Thune is Senate Majority Leader, and what have they done since the Senate has went into session this year? We're going on 6 months now, and I believe only 6 bills have made it to President Trump's desk.
It's pathetic.
It is, and we've been watching.
And he's quit almost Friday, like he works 5 days a week.
He doesn't.
The U.S. Senate goes in on Tuesday afternoon, works Wednesdays maybe, and leaves Thursday by noon. They work at most 2 days over a 3-day period out of a 7-day period. And that's not and that doesn't take into account that they take off weeks at a time for quote unquote recesses where, they can go on their cruises or doing Lord knows what, or their junkets where they go to El Salvador to check out on
like Chris Van Hollen, check it out with Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
Right. Ugh.
The MS-13 member.
This is just an insult to American taxpayers. It's shameful. Why don't they show up for work and actually cut spending? That's not complicated. It's not hard. Look at, Thomas Massey pointed this out. He has what he calls the Massey plan. Throw the big, beautiful bill in the trash and start over skinny. Number 1, extend the 2017 tax cuts. Absolutely. Number 2, end the Green New Deal cold turkey. There is no excuse for any Republican to buy into any part of the Green New Deal. Not one teeny tiny part. It needs to be thrown out completely. There is nothing conservative or, in my opinion, Republican about wanting to make people have higher electric bills, higher gasoline bills. But unfortunately, Republicans, they just want higher gas taxes. And in the state of Indiana, they want tolls. They want a toll 465. I'm trying to stop it. We'll see if we can. They want a toll 65, 70, 74, 69.
Pretty much all the interstates.
Everything. So that when you're going to work, you're going to have to pay $6 just to go to work. To pay for the people that are sitting at home getting welfare checks.
That's accurate.
So you have to pay the taxes by going to work to pay for the people that aren't working. Plus you pay for the roads through the gasoline tax that you already pay for. Plus you're going to have to pay a toll. Lord knows where that money is going to. Probably to some big corporation that someone through the IEDC is
Which
selecting.
needs to go, by the way.
Yeah, that
They need
needs
to get
be.
rid of that.
So, yeah, we'll get back into that, folks, in a future episode. But so, Thomas Massey, back on this. No bloat for the military-industrial complex. You can't be spending $200,000 for a bag of washers. You can go into an Ace Hardware store and buy for $30 or $10.
Yeah.
That's what's going on, folks. Toilet seats today, a toilet seat, I believe, is $15,000. There was a senator named William Proxmire from Wisconsin back in the 1980s, and he rightly called out back then extravagant government waste were back in the 1980s. $2,000 for a toilet seat, I think, or $3,000. He called that out as extravagant spending. Today, $3,000. That buy you a value meal at McDonald's anymore with what the dollar's doing. But they're $15,000 today. There's no oversight. There's no fiscal responsibility. Yes, we need a lethal military to kill terrorists and any evildoers. That doesn't mean you just throw money onto the fire and burn it. And that's what we're doing today. Number 4 on Massey's plan, no SALT. That means no state and local taxes being exempted from federal income tax. Why on earth should Indiana be subsidizing taxpayers in New York State and California? Look what's going on in those states. Look at what's happening, with how they are doing a horrible job on forest management for the forest fires in Los Angeles, and they blame climate change when they're not doing their proper forest maintenance. No, let them pay their own ticket. It's a Hoosier value to pay your own way. To go to work, you want to buy a house, have the American flag out front with the white picket fence out by the road, and have a tomato garden or some roses. Oh, yeah. And live the American dream. But these career politicians are destroying that dream. They are destroying it, one in Indiana, by these exorbitant and now they're going up so much for your property tax every year that a lot of people are getting pushed out of their houses that they already paid for. That's absolutely wrong. In my opinion, your house is your castle. The government should keep their hands off of it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Let Hoosiers enjoy their homes. We live in such a beautiful state. Why is it being destroyed?
Exactly.
By these people that want nothing but these giant buildings for Eli Lilly and taking all the farmland, and
we have to protect our farmland.
Let the free market work that out. Don't let the government pick winners and losers. That's why I'm a conservative. I'm a Margaret Thatcher conservative. She was Prime Minister of Britain for over 12 years. She was rock solid conservative. She balanced the budget in Britain for 12 years. Can't say that about conservatives, quote unquote conservatives, because they are not conservatives. They are so unconservative. They are liberals. So back to Thomas Massey's plan. I'm sorry, I'm going on to this. He calls for, and I agree, a full and complete border wall from the Gulf of America to the Pacific Ocean. Again, only 26% of Republicans in 2017 and 18 supported a border wall. Jim Banks and everyone voted for leadership that blocked President Trump's border wall. They always held it out as a carrot in front of President Trump, saying, well, we'll do it next term or after the midterms. Then after the midterms, the Democrats win. And that's what their plan is now. I sincerely believe this, and this is not me just saying this. The Republicans absolutely want the Democrats to regain the majority in the House and the Senate in 2028. And isn't that sad? After all the money we've all put into the Republican Party to get the majority, and what are they doing with it? They are sitting there doing nothing. Only 6 bills have been sent to President Trump so far this term. That's inexcusable. Look at everything that we have all worked so hard for, and to celebrate it with a Republican presidency, a Republican Congress, a Republican Senate, where we should be passing bills every day to enact every one of the Doge cuts. Elon Musk saved over $500 billion, with a B, billion dollars just in 3 months. He was on track, in my opinion, to save $2 trillion this year. That would have been enough savings, folks, so that we would not have to extend the debt ceiling. We would not have to go into debt one further penny. Instead, Republicans in Congress they're talking about maybe possibly doing $9 billion in cuts. That's 0.018% of what Elon Musk has found just in 3 months, let alone speak of what he was on track to finding of the $2 trillion. The reason he got stopped, in my opinion, is because he was getting ready to identify all this massive government waste and where this money was going to these organizations that these congressmen and senators, their wives and spouses, work for. It is absolutely wrong. The Republican Congress, other than Thomas Massey,
Warren Davidson,
Rand Paul, we need to challenge every one of these people. We need real conservatives. Folks, we're out of time. When we come back, we'll get right back into this. This is John Rust on The John Rust Show. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on Rest on the Radio, Freedom 95, broadcasting all across central Indiana on 950 AM and 95.9 FM, right here on your radio dial. So we were talking about this awful, big, beautiful bill and this falling out between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And I wanted to bring out something extremely important because a lot of people are saying something about Elon Musk that, well, he's just mad because he wasn't going to get the credits anymore. Elon Musk, in 2021 stated he supported eliminating electric vehicle tax credits and gas and oil subsidies, calling Biden's EV spending bill unnecessary. He absolutely made similar comment in 2025 about the big beautiful bill. He said he called for absolutely no credits for electric vehicles, and he would be the one directly impacted the most of any individual in the world.
Tesla would be impacted.
Because he believes, as do I and all true conservatives, that the government should not be picking winners and losers. You shouldn't be forced to subsidize your neighbor's electric vehicle. If they want an electric vehicle, fantastic. I may get an electric vehicle someday. The performance on them is phenomenal.
I might get one too if I ever get
the money.
They're
not practical for a farmer.
No.
Because of the charging issues, and if I have to haul something to Iowa, the range just will not make it. You can go into a gas station, fill up in 5 or 10 minutes, and be gone.
Yeah.
I don't have a half hour to sit and charge an EV somewhere. And if it's cold, you have to charge twice because we'll get into electric vehicles in the future. But they are fantastic for local driving.
Sure.
Truly fantastic, and the performance is phenomenal. So I absolutely support Elon Musk and Tesla. And bravo for him for calling out that we need to end those credits. That shows you, folks, where it hits the pocketbook. Elon Musk is 100% correct, and he is not being hypocritical. He called for that way before any of the falling out with Donald Trump. But hopefully they'll get back together. We'll see how that goes. But, Elon Musk, he's someone of character. And another person on that, and it relates to Indiana, is Ron DeSantis, and how Ron DeSantis is fighting in Florida to eliminate property taxes entirely. Not just a credit, but he has a plan that he is working on, and we need to do the same thing here in Indiana to eliminate property taxes.
Exactly.
Definitely, and he spoke at a press conference a couple days ago where he talked about how it could be done, and he explained fiscally how, with the state of Florida's budget, how that could be accomplished. And then he gave the numbers, and he basically asked the Florida legislature to get it done.
That's the big deal I have with all this, quote unquote, the billions and billions and billions of dollars, for instance, that goes for the quote unquote homeless problem in California.
It doesn't actually
go for all it does is it increases it because they're in it for the grift. They're in it for the money, for the bureaucracy to oversee the homeless camps and populations. They're not in it to stop homelessness. They make money off of it. Their salary is dependent on homeless people existing. The real goal is you should not have homeless people. Everyone should have home ownership. Unfortunately, here in Indiana, with what property taxes are doing, and only increasing, the assessments are going up way, way, way more than the rate of inflation. It is astronomical how much people's property, and they don't realize it until they get the bill, and they're like, holy crap, what's going on? Why am I being taxed so high? And the state GOP here in Indiana, they're like, well, that's just how it is. You got to pay it. It's because they are the party of government. We need the Republicans to be the party of conservatives again. We need a Margaret Thatcher Republican Party.
Absolutely.
We do not need the Jim Banks tax and spend and toll party. Why on earth are we trying to introduce tolls? I will not give up on this. I will be a broken record just repeating over and over again. Tolls are a tax on working people. And I'll say this again, your gasoline tax paid for that road. And there is abundant gasoline tax funds coming in. Gasoline tax funds since 2017 have increased over 20%. The politicians are saying, oh, no, the funds are coming down because people are switching to electric cars. That's bull.
Oh, no, the funds are going up.
The funds are going way up. Where is all that money going? Why are
the LEAP district, all that other stuff.
Don't get me started on why we are taking water from Lafayette and moving it down
To Lebanon, I
to
think.
Lebanon. Yeah, it's
Makes zero sense.
yeah. Folks, we have to get back to reality. We have to get back to conservatism. We have to get back to hard work in Indiana. You know, a big issue we have is all these elected statewide politicians. You know, that's one thing I learned when I got into this, because I was never in politics. But I attended, and I still go to a lot of Lincoln Day dinners and to business functions all across the state of Indiana and political events. And a lot of these events, I kid you not, I will show up and you will have the Secretary of State, you'll have the Attorney General, you'll have the State Treasurer, you'll have the Governor, you'll have the Lieutenant Governor. There will be more people in the room from elected statewide office than there are from local people there to hear them. Why are we not cutting waste, fraud, and abuse in the state of Indiana? Why has there not been a DOJ committee here to cut so much? Because we all see, you know, one of the pet peeves of mine is these roundabouts, because some of these roundabouts, folks, can cost $3.5 million each. 4 stop signs cost $800.
It's cheaper to do 4 stop signs than it is a roundabout, and roundabouts are just useless.
It takes a long time to get used to them. How many people get injured and even killed in these roundabouts from people driving around not knowing how to use them? Yeah, that's increasing, but you know, where my mom lives, they have a roundabout, and there are just accidents there every week. And you know, people seriously injured. A lady from her church had her back broken in a roundabout accident earlier this spring.
Yeah.
Back broken.
And
She's not paralyzed.
Yeah.
But
And recently I was down, and Justin and I were hanging out in Brown County and also in Columbus. There's almost no roundabouts there. And even the ones that are, they're very few, actually. Almost none.
And it was very peaceful down there too.
Only and the intersections, only 4 stop signs.
Yeah.
Well, that's, you know, unfortunately it's Republicans that are putting them in, but Democrats, you know, it's this war on cars.
Yeah.
You know, why are we converting Indiana roads into bikeways? Folks, we're going to talk about that more next week. We're out of time here, but I want to say once again, thank you so much for listening. It means so much to me. This is John Rust on the Radio. I will keep shining the light. I will keep raising the curtain on what's going on in Indiana. Let's at least try to stop the Indiana State GOP from imposing. My number one goal right now is from imposing these toll roads. Let's stop this in its tracks right now. So I'm going to close with my favorite Bible verse, Psalm 118, verse 24. My dad started putting this on egg cartons in the 1980s, and so if you shop for eggs at Aldi's back in the day, you'll recognize this verse. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Folks, thanks so much for listening. This is John Russ signing off. I'll see you all again next week on the radio.